This is the Vietnam War in 10 minutes. Part 1. The early years. In the early 1950s, the US backed South Vietnam as a way of containing the spread of communism. Similar to how we contained the spread of communism in Greece and Italy after World War II, but it was unlong before the communist Viet Cong guerrillas in the north started to make gains against the South Vietnamese Army, or the AR, VN for short. And so in 1963, the US decided to send military advisors to assist the South Vietnamese. And that same year, the first American combat troops arrived. And you're probably thinking, wait, what? We were supposed to be supporting South Vietnam, not fighting in it. Well, this is actually where things get kind of complicated, because the United States was not officially at war with North Vietnam. Even when President Johnson escalated the war in 1964 by sending in more troops and launching Operation Rolling Thunder, a sustained aerial bombing campaign against North Vietnam, technically the US was still not at war with North Vietnam. Instead, the official reason for America's involvement was to prevent the fall of another country to communism. Just like what happened in China in 1949, and like how they had to contain the spread of communism in Greece and Italy after World War II. However, despite not being officially at war with North Vietnam, America's presence there quickly escalated from a few hundred military advisors in 1961 to over 200. Zero troops by 1968. The US was bogged down in the jungle warfare of the Vietnamese, which was very different than their conventional wars they had previously fought against European powers like in Korea or World War II. The VC and North Vietnamese Army, or NVA for short, would use hit-and-run tactics, disappearing into the dense jungles after attacking, and they also employed something called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This trail system stretched through Laos and Cambodia, allowing the Vietnamese to receive supplies from the north without having to travel across the demilitarized zone, or DMZ, for short, between North and South Vietnam. This was a problem for the Americans because although the DMZ was heavily guarded by both sides, it was possible for special forces and spies to cross over. But once they used the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia, tracking them became nearly impossible due to the density of the jungle. So, the US began heavy bombing runs through the trails in order to interdict supplies and troops. But due to the immense size of the jungle, these efforts proved mostly ineffective. Despite all of this, the Americans thought that victory was near when in 1968 they launched the Tet Offensive. Now I've made an entire video about the Tet Offensive, which you can check out here. But basically, the Tet Offensive was a surprise attack by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army. At first, it seemed like the offensive was going well, as they seized multiple major cities such as Hue, the second largest city in Vietnam. However, as time went on, the ARVN and US troops fought back, pushing the communists out of the cities, and eventually leading to the VC and NVA retreating into the jungle. Although the Tet Offensive failed, the political fallout from the war was severe. 4 years, the US government had told its people that we were winning the war. But the Tet Offensive showed the American public the true picture. And this led to massive anti-war protests throughout the United States. Not even President Johnson, who escalated the war, could deny the American public the truth any longer. Part 2. The Cambodian Incursion and the End of the War. In 1969, President Richard Nixon took office. He wanted to end the war, but also save face for the United States. So, he did 2 things. First, he announced he would stop the bombing of North Vietnam in order to open peace negotiations. Secondly, he ordered the invasion of Cambodia. The reasoning behind the invasion was that Cambodia was another one of those supply routes for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. By invading Cambodia, Nixon hoped to cut off the trail once and for all. But, much like in Vietnam, the US got bogged down in the Cambodian jungle. This caused even more political backlash in the US, as people felt that Nixon was lying to them, just like President Johnson had. And this was only made worse when the My Lai massacre occurred in March of 1968. American troops had mistakenly attacked and killed over 500 unarmed Vietnamese civilians. Although the media tried to keep it quiet at first, eventually the story broke out, causing immense humiliation for the US and further damaging support for the war. By 1973, it was clear to Nixon that he could not win in Vietnam, and so he agreed to peace negotiations with North Vietnam, which included the release of all American prisoners of war in exchange for all South Vietnamese prisoners of war. The peace deal was signed on January 27, 1973, and the last American troops left Vietnam on May 1975. Soon afterwards, North Vietnam invaded and captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, and this marked the end of the Vietnam War. Now, there's a lot more to the Vietnam War that I didn't cover in this video, such as the role of the Hmong people, which I covered in my previous video. Also, the Vietnam War is one of the most controversial wars in American history. There are many who believe that the war was a complete waste, and that the US should have never been involved in the first place. On the other hand, some argue that the war was necessary to contain the spread of communism. Ultimately, though, it's up to you to decide whether or not America was right to fight in Vietnam. But I do hope you learned something from this video. Now, if you want to learn more about the Vietnam War, I highly recommend checking out the series on the Vietnam War. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. As always, I would also like to thank my amazing supporters for helping me make these videos. You guys are amazing, and I'll see you in the next video.